just met her this evening, and learned of her just days ago. And she's co-chair of the Democracy for America Palm Beach County chapter, which is quite a progressive group. She's a membership chair and charter board member of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Florida, the precinct captain for the Democratic Party. She's committed to progressive organizing and coalition building through Florida Progressives Away Palm Beach County. And she's going to speak a little bit about how and why Democracy for America Palm Beach County endorsed Nan very early on. So, without further ado.
Thank you. Have to lower this a little bit. Whoa, whoa. Maybe I'll just hold it. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this wonderful event. I am so honored to be able to come here and say a few words about Senator Nan Rich. As Richard said, I am co-chair of Democracy for America Palm Beach County, which came out of the Howard Dean campaign and was originally founded by Howard Dean. And we are committed to growing a progressive voice in Palm Beach County and beyond in several ways. One is to groom and help support progressive candidates in all levels of government, and also to educate and promote progressive issues. And when we decided, well, first of all, yes, Democracy for America Palm Beach County, the local organization, was a very early endorser of Nan Rich, and with very little discussion, it basically came down to when we were going to do it, not if. We feel very strongly that Nan is someone that we have long respected. We've seen her record of voting on things like women's issues, gun safety, equality issues, equality for all, environmental issues, all of the things that we as progressives stand for. We saw in her somebody who we could see a history. We saw a history of voting on these issues, of speaking out on these issues. And if you go back and look at some of the videotapes of some of the videos of the state legislature and see some of her discussions on the floor, it's pretty amazing. She's somebody that we believe we can really count on to do what's best for all of us. She has been 12 years in the state legislature, first as a state legislator and then as a state senator. She was the first woman Senate minority leader, and we really hope that she's going to be the first woman governor. So in addition, I also have been asked to let you know that in addition to DFA Palm Beach County endorsing her, DFA Miami-Dade, also known as DFAM, was also an early endorser. And as of last week, the brand new and improved DFA Broward has also endorsed me. On that note, I am one of the greatest Nan fans, and I am sure that when you hear her, you will be too, if you're not already. Thank you. And here is Senator Nan Rich.
Thank you so much, Hillary. Hillary got on board early, as you can hear, and it's very exciting because She is one dynamo, I'll tell you, all around the state and helping in this campaign. So thank you for everything that you've done for this campaign. Thank you. And I just want to thank Richard and Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much. And my friend Tom Gustafson in the back there. Tom, let me tell you, if he had his way, my campaign would be solely about sea level rise. It's not an extremely important issue, it is. But I think you all agree that we've got a lot of issues going on in the state of Florida. And I want to just share a few of those with you so that you can get a sense of who I am and what the issues that I have found to be important, not only as a legislator, but as someone that has been traveling the state. I was term limited in November of 2012. And I started traveling because when the session was over, I thought about who might run from the Democratic side for governor. I know one thing that I found out in 350 visits around the state of Florida in 2 years, over 135,000 miles we traveled in multiple cars. That's not counting the flights, which are pretty hard sometimes intra-city in the state of Florida. But one thing that we did find out, that I did find out, is that people of this state, first of all, you can hardly find someone that voted for Rick Scott. And then, when you do, when you're in a crowd of people, I can tell you that they want him to be a one-term governor. Yeah. And I guess pretty much the reason they feel that way is because all the things that Hillary just listed are nothing that this man focuses on, believes in, except maybe a little bit in an election year, such as this year, where one of the most important issues I've found all over the state of Florida happens to be public education. Every community, I don't care where it is in the state of Florida, public education is the #1 issue. And you would say, well, how about jobs in the economy? I actually tie healthcare and education to jobs in the economy. Because those are the 2 areas where if you go back and look at what happened during the recession, those are the 2 areas that did not lose jobs, education and the healthcare. And where do you think the cuts came, though? From the legislature. That was in areas of education and healthcare. And by the way, that goes through 2 Republican governors, Charlie Crist and Rick Scott. Now, I've served under 3 Republican governors. It's almost 16 years. I've never been in the majority. Never, right? When Hillary mentioned about being elected the Democratic leader, the first woman elected Democratic leader of the Senate, I've had 12 Democrats out of 40 state senators. That's a minority. And what I had to do, and I think this is important, by the way, I am not a person that compromises my core values and principles, and you'll hear that as I go along with this conversation. I was able to work across the aisle on a number of issues. And like when I talk about public education, one of the biggest issues in 2012 was the Parent Trigger Bill. How many of you have heard about that bill? And that was a bill, probably the worst bill of the session, although there were a lot of them, but that was one of the worst. And that bill was an attempt to privatize public schools and turn them over to for-profit management companies. So we started to work on that bill. And I was able to keep my 12 Democrats together, which sometimes isn't easy, and pick up 8 Republicans who also felt that it was wrong to privatize and to turn schools over to private. So we killed the bill on the last day of the session by a 2020 vote, on a 2020 vote. Now, when someone says, and many people say, how are you going to be able to work with a Republican legislature? And I say, and get anything done? And I said, well, because I already have done that. I already worked with the Republican legislature. Who hasn't worked with the Republican legislature is Rick Scott, believe it or not. And this is serious because we in this state did not take the $51 billion that is our share of Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. That is morally reprehensible as far as I'm concerned. said, oh, I'm in favor of Medicaid expansion. Well, if you are, then you need to do something about it. And he did nothing about it. He never even met with the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, Will Weatherford and Don Gates. He never met with them. So now that would be meeting with someone of your own party, which I think is a heck of a lot easier than meeting and trying to get 8 Republicans to cross over and join you in the Parent Trigger Bill. Or the prison privatization bill. We did that one on a 21-19 vote. So I have a track record, and Hillary mentioned about your record, and I believe that your record is an indicator. What you've done is the strongest indicator of what you're doing in the future. Let me just get back to public education for a minute. One of the other things that is really, to me, very distressing about what's gone on in the last 16 years, it all ties into education reform, which was started by Jeb Bush.
Yep.
And then it was followed by Rick Scott, by Charlie Crist, and then Rick Scott. And when I look at one of the most egregious things happens to be vouchers. Jeb started the corporate scholarship tax program, and then Charlie signed a bill that gave it the biggest expansion until last Friday, when Rick Scott signed another expansion, which was even larger, which, according to the analysis of the bill, if you read it, go online and read it, it says that $3 billion, that's what it would be, $3 billion will be taken away from our public schools, because those dollars are what is going to the corporate tax scholarship program. Now, you can argue and say, well, maybe they wouldn't have given that money to public education, but highly unlikely that money is going to be moved so that children will go, so that public dollars will be used for private schools and not for public schools, and that's wrong. So that's something that I would work very hard to turn around, to reduce that, to put that money into our public schools. We are still 48th in the nation in state funding of public education. That is, if you look at the census, that is in the census data, that Florida is 48th in the nation. Now, we're also, by the way, 50th in funding of higher ed. So and that's a fact also, and when I said earlier about the jobs in the economy, to me, I agree with what Pew Research said when they came in and looked at they did an analysis of our economic incentive for businesses. And they said only 1 out of 3 jobs ever materializes. There's no accountability for the dollars. They never come back to us if the businesses and corporations don't do what they said they were doing, they were supposed to do. And so they said, you'd be better off if you invested that in your colleges and universities. And I agree, because you have incubators, you have, if you take the Medicaid expansion, the University of Florida says that there would be 122,000 new healthcare jobs that came out of that money. Because when you insure another 1.2 million people, which is what that money will do, or would have done, you need new healthcare providers. You can't provide healthcare with the same number of providers when you have over 1 million more people insured. So by not taking it, you affect jobs. You also affect our hospitals, particularly the safety net hospitals in our state, like the Jackson Memorials, the Shands, and the children's hospitals, because children's hospitals have 70% Medicaid patients. So if you no longer have the subsidies that were there before the Affordable Care Act, and you didn't take the Medicaid expansion, then you have nothing to take its place. And I can tell you something will take its place, and it probably will be dollars from the community and from taxpayers, because when people come to the hospitals and they're not insured, somebody's going to pay. And a lot of people who have private insurance will then be paying for that. So those are two, to me, of the most difficult things that have happened. I also want to mention with regard to education, I have been very involved in early childhood education issues, when we passed universal pre-K in the state of Florida for 4-year-olds, in the 75 words, it said twice, high-quality educational opportunities for 4-year-olds. That is not what we're doing today, not since the program began. We only meet 3 of the national benchmarks for high quality. We have one of the lowest funded programs per child. We have less than $2,500. The average in the nation is $4,100. That's for a year. Tell me how you provide high quality pre-K for less than $2,500 a year. And I'll tell you how. Because we still don't have even the goal of degree teacher for 4-year-olds. Now, if you go anywhere in the world where they have pre-K today, and all industrialized countries have it, they all have degree teachers. We don't. Part of that goes back to the whole issue of religious and not religious schools, and religious schools don't want the government telling them what they have to do, but they want the money. And I say, if you want the money, then you have to be held accountable, and there is no way you have a high-quality program without degree teachers. So those are 2 of the major issues. Let me just mention a couple of others. It was briefly mentioned about guns, and yes, I've been out there. I believe that we need to have sensible gun laws, and I believe that since I started in so when I first got to the House, I started filing bills to close the gun show loophole and for background screenings, and of course they were never heard. And the last year that the NRA under Marion Hammer, who's the head of all of this, and they are the biggest body in Tallahassee, they did a ranking, and you have to know that my primary opponent, Mr. Scott, has always had an A rating, at one point even an A+ rating from the NRA, because it was never a gun bill that he didn't like or sign, and including the one that says that you can bring your guns to work as long as your gun is locked in the car. And I always was very vocal on the floor, filing bills and filing amendments to try and get some sense, and bring some sense to our gun laws. And so for that, I was awarded with an F rating. I want to thank you for that, because wherever I go in the state, actually people applaud. Even in the Panhandle, Democrats. I'm not saying right-wing Republicans, Tea Party, whatever, but Democrats. They support sensible gun laws. They believe, that they have their guns and whatever. But let me tell you something. When a bill was passed, and I stood up on the floor and argued against it, and I said, even if you pass this, it's unconstitutional. And that's a bill called Dobbs versus Glocks. That was a bill in 2012 that said that a doctor, a pediatrician, for example, the number 1 example, could not ask the parents of their patient if there was a gun in the home. Now, the analysis of the bill said that there was a problem with that, and there is a problem, and the court agreed with it. The lower court and the appellate court both said that it's unconstitutional by virtue of freedom of speech. The doctor has the right to ask. It's not about taking the gun away. It is about the fact that they've taken a Hippocratic oath that says, I'm there to protect the health and safety of the children that I see. So I want to know, if you have a gun in the home, I want to say to you, you need to keep it locked. You need to keep the bullets someplace else. The day that this bill passed, my friend Judy Schachter, who is the interim, actually dean right now of the pediatrics at the University of Miami School of Medicine, she sent me an email filled with stories of little children who had lost their lives because they found guns in their home. One little boy put his hand up into a box that's on a shelf, and the gun was there. And he took it down and he shot himself. And I just, for the life of me, cannot understand why anybody would be against, making sure that something like that can't happen. So that's been the issue. Environment was mentioned, and I have to say, I've been traveling a lot, as I said, around the state. I've been doing a lot of traveling and learning about environmental issues. Our issues here are very different than the central part of the state where they have the springs. Indian River Lagoon, which is not too far from here. I spent several hours out on the lagoon with the head environmentalist, who is just destroyed by the fact that the Indian River Lagoon is deteriorating. The seagrass has algae all through it. The pollutants that are being dumped in there from Lake Okeechobee, and it's destroying the economic value of the Indian River Lagoon. You have 5 counties that are actually all surrounding that. And in the springs, I always say to people when I was at the University of Florida quite a while ago, we used to go down to Silver Springs, and I remember the pristine white sand, go on the glass bottom boats, and now, unfortunately, you have seagrass that has algae in it. And the vegetation around the springs, both in Marion County and Alachua County, is disappearing. And that is affecting the flow of the springs, which affects the flow of the water and the aquifer, and everything, all of it, connects to our water resources. So when Martha said about we need to have much more attention and a comprehensive kind of approach to all of this, which includes the things I just mentioned, and sea level rise and climate change, this is incredibly important, and we are not paying attention to something that we cannot stop. So we better figure out how to control it if we can, because we're not going to be able to totally stop the tide. I grew up on Miami Beach, and I can tell you right now that at certain times Alton Road is totally flooded. Never was before, but it is now, and so things are happening. They're building a new Turkey Point nuclear plant where the old one is down in South Dade, and people are very upset. And part of it is because of sea level rise. And you remember what happened in Japan with the tsunami. So people are incredibly concerned, and we need to make sure that we have a comprehensive approach to this. There are a lot of other issues, but I want to really let you all have an opportunity to share with me what's of concern to you. But let me just say that I qualified last Tuesday. There were some people that don't applaud and really wanted me not to qualify and not to be in this race. I'm in this race. I've learned is people want a new direction, they want new priorities. They want someone who will get in there and fix our child welfare system. Yeah. I've been involved with that for as long as I've been in the legislature and before as a community activist. And it is a disgrace what is going on in this state right now with regard to the jeopardy in which we place children's lives. 477 of them died from 2008 to 2014. They died. They weren't in the child welfare system yet, but they were known to the Department of Children and Families because of abuse calls that had come from the hotline, that had gone into the hotline. Protective investigators went out, and I'm not laying this on the protective investigators. People need to be trained. They need to have the credentials. And then, if you're going to leave children in their home, which is called family preservation, instead of taking them out and putting them into foster care, then you better have the services available to protect those children in their home, and we don't in the state of Florida. This year, only $10 million in the entire state budget went for services to keep children in their homes. 68% of those kids, those 477, there was substance abuse issues in those homes, and those families needed treatment, and they didn't get it. And that left the children in jeopardy. So these are just, some of the issues. But I will tell you that some people say, how can you win? And I'm going to tell you that I believe I'm going to win. In this state, there's precedent for people that didn't have the most money or the most name recognition actually winning. And I'll give you 3 examples. Ruben Askew, Lawton Childs, and Bob Graham. They won. And they ran against people that had more money and more name recognition. Of course, we can look at Barack Obama. It's another example. And I look at the recent thing that happened in the state of Virginia with Eric Cantor, who was the number 2 leader in the House, and he had so much money and name recognition, and his opponent had $200,000. And guess what? His opponent won. So, I don't want to hear anybody say, he's got all the money, he's going to win. I'll tell you who's going to decide who's going to win this election, and it's going to be the voters on election day.
Yeah.
And I'm focusing on those voters. The Democratic nominee, and then with your help and vote and support, will be the first woman governor, and governor from all over the state. Questions? Anybody else? Yes.
You mentioned about that the privatization of schools were defeated in the legislature. However, we have charter schools, so actually it wasn't defeated. And what is your take on charter schools?
Now, these are two different things, charter schools and private schools. Charter schools are a type of public schools. It's not a traditional public schools, but they are a type of public schools. What I say about charter schools is there are many good charter schools, but there are many bad charter schools. And what happens is that there is not the same accountability for those schools that there is for a traditional public school. And when someone writes and says, you can't close down a bad public school, yes, you can. And you can convert it to a charter school. There are 5 turnaround models that are part of the statutes today. And local school districts can work to change and turn those schools around. Unfortunately, you have charter schools that are out there that, as I said, don't have the accountability. And what happens is they may end up closing their doors, they run out of money, they don't have the same financial responsibility that you get when you're part of the actual traditional public school system. And a lot of these schools are allowed to open up without a solid financial base. They don't have to have the same credentials of teachers, credentialed teachers. There are all different kinds of differences. And so I had Pembroke Pines, City of Pembroke Pines, has a city charter school district. It's fabulous. It's wonderful. It's a non-profit. There's nobody there taking money away from the kids and the teachers and siphoning it off. It's all going into the school. They have the same. They live up to the same accountability of the traditional public school. So we just need to make sure. Let me tell you, when we killed the parent-trigger bill in 2012, I stood up and I got all of this information from the Superintendent's Association.